Okay, old timers of the Directors Club.
Okay, and you two Simpsons up there, don't forget to use your microphones.
Oh, yes.
Have you got them turned on?
So the rest of us can hear you.
Yes.
Mac keeps us all on track. I guess they're good at whistling. All right. Here's a few signs. I added a couple of them are hanging at the Directors Club. This I found years ago, and I think it's quite appropriate. Next. This is hanging at the Directors Club on the wall. Next. This I photographed at Cassie's before they sold it, and I thought it was appropriate to add. Just to get us in the right mood. Next. Oh, this hangs at the Directors Club, and I can't really name all those people because I was too young. But anyway, it's kind of fun to see that, and they have it up on the wall. Next.
Well, before we move on to the next one, just wanted to point out this poker hand. The bulldog here has got 4 aces and a 2. But the other bulldog up here has a straight flush in diamonds to the 6, and that's the high hand. Har har.
Here's a photograph of today's club, Heart Mountain in the background on 19th Street. And Glenn Nielsen gave this piece of property to the club, and then the club members all chipped in and they built this building. And I was invited down there with some of the club members and then invited back to a meeting, and I photographed, which we'll see some later on. But this is the current clubhouse since, what, the 70s? 76. Thank you, Robin. Okay, next. It's up to you, gentlemen.
Well, he was the founder. Go ahead. Oh, yeah.
This was our local Santa Claus. This guy was Buffalo Bill's right arm in this town. Beck Avenue, of course, named for him. The Beck property, unfortunately, is down, but the old mansion was right behind the pizza parlor, which used to be the library. We tore down the Carnegie Library and tore down the Beck Mansion. Wish we had him back. But the Beck Mansion was run by this very kindly, very imposing, very tall gentleman. And
And they called him the governor.
The
He was
governor.
never the governor, but he looked like one, for sure. And he had a very imposing thing with the kids. He would sit in this dark room with the big fireplace in that old stone house, now gone. Huge easy chair, cigar, a little nip, a little drappy there sitting at its side, and say, "What are you kids doing in here?" We'd go, "I don't know." Get out. And then he would charm us and give us candy, and there was a suit of armor in the hallway, which is the most frightening thing. We thought someone was in it. And he used to terrify us with that with us. So none of that we could go on. There he is. He started it all.
And he gave great parties for kids. He really was a kindly gentleman. There's some nifty pictures of us and people now who are old timers sitting on that porch with party hats and those crazy, what do you call those things that you blow, and we all know what it is.
Poppers or something.
Yeah, poppers or something. Anyhow, he was imposing for us, for kids. He was remarkable. He was Santa Claus.
Okay, next.
Well, there's Walt
Our mayors.
Owens. He was one of the mayors, and his house was one of the original houses out in that area of town, which is now the house of Judy Frisbee. And Don Frisbee with where everybody puts their political signs on the fence. That was Walter Owen's house, and he was a genial JP and a kindly man. He had a huge, wasn't big, it was a big picture, black and white picture of snakes up on I think it was, well, Rattlesnake Mountain, obviously, but he'd say, how many snakes are in that picture? And you'd look, I think there were 33 sitting in the sun, all rattlers, and we were charmed by that.
Yes, we were. We were. Well, it interests me when you talk about where the house is, and we talked about these landmarks. We're sitting on a piece of property here that had nothing. It was just sagebrush. The town was 2,000 people when Al and I were just kids. And if you took an old clothespin with the little metal clamp and put a kitchen match in it just right, you could shoot it as a firecracker. You could shoot. So every time we see this part of the property, we remember how completely we were able to burn down all of this area out here.
They didn't know what they were doing with those matches, and you'd get that clothespin and you'd fire that baby. Well, enough of that. I won't do that. Oh, yes.
Oh, Doc Trueblood.
There he is. He was the only doc in town. Pete was born in Sheridan, and I was born in Denver because the folks lived here in Cody, but Doc Trueblood, my mother gained about 30 or 40 pounds, and he said, you know, I don't know how to handle this in a pregnancy. And you get on the train and you get on the Pullman and went to Denver, and I was born in Mercy Hospital in Denver, and they played cards and stuck around and took me home. But he was the only, and then Dr. Dakin came next, if I'm not mistaken.
We'll see him later on.
Dakin was more interesting than, he was more virile. Well, where were we?
Doc Trueblood had a son named Jimmy Trueblood, and he was tough. And I can remember Al and I out in the park one time because Dad was defending a figure who was very controversial in a law case, and everybody went to see the courthouse cases. That was the entertainment. It was better than TV. And we were out in the park, and the prosecuting attorney's son, who was bigger than us, was also out in the park. And he took after Al and me, and he got in a good punch at Al, and I ran. And, yeah, but thankfully Jimmy Trueblood came up between us and this guy, and we made it through the day. But Trueblood was a great man for our town.
There's old Bob Woodruff. Now there's the old man. He was president of Coca-Cola. He was one of the 7 people that had the formula in his head, and in the safe too. And he bought the TE. Pete and I worked there 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We worked there about 4 summers in the hayfield. Anyway, he came to town, and he was sponsoring, Coca-Cola was sponsoring Edgar Bergen. And Edgar Bergen was sponsoring Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snurd. And he brought his little daughter, who was about 11, and what was her name? Murphy Brown.
No, it was Candace Bergen, who became Murphy Brown in the TV show.
The horror story for all of us who worked there and anyone there, Bergen would reach around a horse's head, and there's that marvelous lower jaw, and he'd say, "Get this lard butt off of my back." And everybody'd look around, and somebody said, "Can you get a lighter weight person on my back?" Well, then he'd throw his voice all over the arena up there, and then he taught the horse how to drink Coca-Cola. Put Coke on the floor, and old cow, that horse would die. Well, yeah, enough of that. But he was a good neighbor, one people. That's Charlie Duncan brought it.
Closer.
Yes, Peter, you were going to tell something. No, you weren't, you know. Oh, I remember him.
Uh-oh, who's this?
Well, anyway, he was other things in life, but he was president of the Directors Club, especially when his mother came to town. And she'd say that her name was Nanny Simpson. She knew all the Richards and all the Frosts. And Pop would say, well, you know, I like it down there. And my mother said, your mother's here, and get home, for God's sake. And he did come. He was like a child, even at 70.
The old place.
Tell him that
was,
one.
oh, this is a beauty. This is a painting, watercolor painting, of Dad by Ed Grigware, the painter. And Ed Grigware put this into a big frame, and it went into the Directors Club.
It said president right at the
And
bottom.
it said president at the bottom. And it was painted for him when they put together an outfit called the Issaquah Bar, which were all the lawyers. Most of them were members of the Directors Club, which, by the way, in the early days was simply the Green Front. People called it the Green Front. It was a false fronted green building on the alley behind the Shoshone Bank. And so, and some of you may be in the Women's Club PEO. I know it was Mom's favorite organization, which nobody knew among the male sect what it meant, what PEO was, except it became Papa's Evening Out. And his evening out was the Green Front. That's where he went. But that portrait is still intact, and it's got around the side, if you have a chance to see it, several things like 4 aces in his pocket.
Yeah.
And
5.
5 aces, and pink elephants dancing around his head.
Oh, yeah.
And then the toast of water, which he used to give, a great story, long one, but a beauty. So it's a deathless painting that hangs today at the ranch, which is too far away for. How did you get that? You must have gone up to the.
They have electronic things that they take pictures, and then you scan them and
I
hang
did.
them back. You knew that. Scanned what?
We had a lot of family help us get that photograph and get it transported down here, but it's fun. We better go on to the next.
Go for it.
Well, of course, you gave a beautiful talk on Glenn Nielsen and Husky, but he was a force, and Pete can tell you how he kind of gathered the money together to buy out Texaco and the other people.
It's worth telling. It's a great story, and if the picture of Ernest Goppert is anywhere close,
We have
I'm
that.
going to tie the 3 of those people together: Glenn, Dad, and Ernest Goppert. Well, Gopp, an attorney in town, Gopp and Dad were on one side or another every doggone case in the county for 30 years, and fought the good fight and had a good, respectful relationship, and boy, they were good at the game. So Glenn Nielsen, a young man in his late 30s, I told this story to young Jim, God rest in peace for that great young man, and he had not heard the story, and it was fun to tell it, but young Glenn, this Glenn, didn't know who Dad was or who Gopp was, except he was in a lawsuit that had a filing that carried his name. So he ran into Dad in the courthouse, and Dad gets a call about 3 weeks after this case at 2 in the morning, and it's Glenn Nielsen. And he was very intense, very devout guy, and he said, Mr. Simpson, I've been praying. And Dad said, that's good. And he said, and your name came up. And Dad said, in what context? And he said, I think that this town could buy that refinery. the old Texaco refinery on the hill. And if we could do it and make a place for this town, make a place for its citizens, make jobs available, and lift the community with an industry that's powerful. And he was so eloquent, it took him about an hour, and finally Dad said, well, I'm in, but Glenn, I can't raise the amount of money you're talking about, which was considerable at the time, among my clients, even if I went to all of them. But if you call Ernest Goppert, another attorney, don't tell him I told you to call, and see what he has to say. Well, Gopp gets a call at 3:30 in the morning, and it's Glenn Nielsen, and he pitches the same wonderful cause to Gopp, and Gopp too is taken by it. And Gopp said, well, Glenn, I can't raise that amount of money among all of my clients, but if you call Simpson, don't tell him I told you to call. You can say. And so the two of them got together and bought that refinery. And that was the beginning of Husky Oil here.
And the people who got that stock were people all over the basin who were keeping, thousands of bucks in their mattress. But they trusted either Goff or Pop, and they all got preferred stock, and they were heavily rewarded through the decades. Well, they weren't rich, but they. Oh yeah, right. Yes, well, you're in charge here.
Switch your mic up real quick.
Now, yes.
Just leave it.
Now who are we down? Oh, W.R. Cole. There he is. Oh, imperious
Or anywhere we can.
fellow, and he was the guy that said we need a hospital, and he gave it, and
Other
he was a Director Club original, and you don't remember, someone will remember that he built a beautiful, magnificent lodge on Carter Mountain, and it burned to the ground. And the lodge that is there now was owned by whoever, Bill Gates or someone has it now. And that was the second lodge, but the first one, boy, I tell you, it was a piece of work, but it was mostly log. But anyway, he was heavyweight, and the hospital and all those things. Anyway, I didn't know him well, but that's Hank's grandfather, Hank Cole of the airport fame.
The millionaire of Oyster Bay, and the home ground in Oyster Bay was called Planting Fields. And Hank took his kids, the whole family, took a trip out to that place, which is now under the surveillance and under the ownership of the state of New York. But if you ever get to Upper Long Island, Planting Fields is a huge, beautiful, beautiful place.
Now there's Ernest J. Goppert Sr. Tell you a quick story about him. Pete can tell you that I was trying a case before Judge Spangler, wonderful man, long gone from here, beautiful. He was so good to us new attorneys. He said, you don't know anything, so just listen to me. And so I'm arguing this case, and this Gopp was on the other side. He said, I object to what Millward is saying. That just is absurd. And Spangler said, it's not Millward, it's Allen. He said, it's the same thing.
He didn't just say it's the same thing. He said it's the same damn thing. Dad said at one time in a law case, he said, that's not the law. He said, if that's the law, I'd eat it. And Gopp said, well, if he does, he'll have more law in his gut than he's got in his head.
Oh, the days it is there. Paul Greer, wonderful man.
Wonderful man.
Very special man. He was a Democrat, U.S. House of Representatives in a totally Republican county and a Republican state. And very honored and respected, and his daughter married Jack Manning, and there are plenty of the kin around. Grievers were in this audience, and he was just one of those highly regarded guys, and very kind. And
A
well,
gentleman, a real gentleman.
I think you were trying to introduce him to your babysitter once, weren't you?
This is really true. And I'll never forget it. I was 6 years old. You can kind of remember things when you're 6, but anyhow, I was sitting in a car, and the babysitter was sitting next to me. Well, I had heard Dad do some very loquacious and social kinds of things, like introducing you to somebody or asking his name. Or so up comes Paul Griever on the street, and I shouted. I said, "Mr. Griever." And Paul came over to the car, and I said, "I'd like to have you meet Ann so-and-so, who is my babysitter." Well, she could have crawled under the seat of that car. She was so unbad. And Griever was marvelous. He doffed his hat, said, "Hello, Mrs. So-and-so, so proud to meet you." And I thought, I must have done a good thing here. Anyhow, those memories will just stay. Well, you know, they'll stay with you.
Oh, there he is.
Oh,
I think he died in his early 60s, if I recall. Devoted Catholic, and studied the history of the Mormon Church for several months, years. And then he did the mural down there at the LDS Church. He did murals in Seattle at the radio station, somewhere in LA. A lot of his art is around here, but you know, you won't. They had a retrospective years ago, and a lot of people brought their stuff forward, and it was an amazing collection. But he's the guy that did the mural of Bottoms Up at the Holiday Inn, but the Holiday Inn people told him not to put that up there. So it's in Ted's basement there, but it's a beautiful picture if you like that kind of.
Ted, if you're in here, keep it safe.
Yeah. But anyway, this is being copied around. Dad went to Washington, and Ed Gregory did this cartoon. The only fan in Washington who knows what he's doing. And this bug-eyed guy, I have it in a lot of sheets of paper. Other people have cabbaged it, but that was sent to Dad when he was in Washington for those 4 years, and there it is. Didn't think Gridware could do something as crude as that.
I was going to say one more thing about Grigware. He did the LA Temple. The mural in the Los Angeles Temple is Ed Grigware. So any of you of the faith or not of the faith, you can go through that temple. It's remarkable. Okay.
Well, there it is, yes. Ah, there he is, the old pro. Molesworth Furniture, Shoshone Furniture. What we remember so much. His son died a year and a half ago. Lee was married to Peggy Thorpen, who was the longtime assistant for Dr. Dakin, and Ann was the bridesmaid at that wedding. But Tom, what we remember was the fire.
Boy, do we.
You can imagine it was a log building filled with wood, turpentine, grease, paint, and it went. I mean, it was a column of smoke would look like Hiroshima.
Never
And-
opened. It was brand new. It
I
had
think it
just
was.
been built, burnt to the ground. And
What we recall was how this community it was a summertime, and this community just went down there and started to set up tables, and women and children came and put up the food and the water, and
guys came to
Never
clean
saw
up
it.
the debris, and ladies were cooking hamburgers. I can remember this so clearly. I was about 7, Al was about 6, and we were down there as a part of the big. We couldn't get into the mix of all that debris, but I'll never forget all the businessmen still with suits on, down there picking up
Searching, yeah.
debris. Just amazing.
Yep, that was a good day. Well, for a bad day, it was a good day.
Again, there,
Ah, C.E. Webster. Mhm.
Uncle Bud.
Uncle Bud, he would sit there at his typewriter and he'd say, Al, I'd be thinking of buying a car. And he'd say, Al, if this figure isn't correct that I'm asking you to pay for this car, I won't sleep a wink. I said, I don't want to hear that. So, Bud, oh, I gave the eulogy at his service. It was a touching thing. There was still shock effect. But he, whatever he was, and he was ornery and opinionated, and he had another rule. If you don't want to vote for a bond issue for the Northwest College, or for District Number 1, or District Number 6, or for the hospital, go home. Because that's how we run the operation. We've done it with taxes, and we do it with the bond issues. And his worst one, a bunch of guys, they came in with hair all over with a van. They said, our van broke down. We'd like to buy a van. And he looked at them and he said, well, what do you got for money? I said, well, we have some money. He said, get the hell out of here. You look a bunch of hippies. So this old Jack and the other people said, Bud, you know who that was? Oh, hell, I don't give a damn. He said, Alabama, the band. They could have bought off the whole dealership. Well, they went to Powell and got one from old Chevy down there.
But, you know, he was great, not only with the community, but with kids. He gave the old Webster Chevrolet building, and it's internal, particularly the downstairs part, to the high school kids, to put together a club. He got a jukebox. You could go down there and dance. Babe Apostolo was a big part of that, the most beautiful gal you ever saw, part of the Greek community. And that became what was called by a Greek name, which meant love of kids, the Hawthorne Club. And I'll never forget that. And it was free of charge. Anything that it needed, like paint, Bud provided it. So he had not only a community spirit, but a love of kids. That worked out.
He was a good man.
Yes, he was.
Cy Tanner. How many of you remember Cy Tanner? Could you raise your hand, anybody? He was the godfather of Cody. He ran the liquor establishments. He knew exactly where they were. Cy and Bessie. There they are. That is Cy. And I tell you, he ran a tight ship. He loved the rodeo. And if more of them had not gone to his home and to his places of establishment, they would have won more gold buckles than they should have. It was a great picture. He had the Lindermans, all of them sitting in a basement, and he was the godfather. He had strings like a puppet around. Well, I don't want to go into it.
Next.
What? Well, now there are that
P. McGee of the
P.
agency.
McGee of the agency, with his unicycle.
Yeah.
There it was. He had it right there across, right next to the post office, and he had a staff person named Nora Mix. And Nora was she kind of ran the shop for a while, but P. McGee was fireman and everything. He was a man boy, and he loved to do this, and he loved the kids, and he loved the volunteers. Well, I don't know, there's so much about P. McGee of the agency.
Chet Castle.
Now there is an interesting, Chet Castle ran the fish hatchery, took over for Dick Russo, who was a guy out there, and his son was Dick Castle, who was a great wrestler and football player. And Dick Castle married your old classmate,
Shirley Archer.
Shirley Archer.
One of the brightest gals in that class. missed valedictorian by, I think, 2 points or something, but very sharp, very smart
I
guy.
missed that by about 2 yards.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that's.
But
you know,
anyway, tell them
always
then
used
that
to
they gave birth to who?
Well, their child was Nancy, later married Dave Friedenthal, and she now is a judge with the, she's a circuit judge, I think. Federal judge. A very, very bright guy. Castle Dick was well-built, nice-looking, handsome guy, and a good athlete. He was so good that he would only show up on Thursday for football practice. And by gad, he started.
We called him
We called him
Thursday.
Thursday Castle.
He got out of some of these terrible scrimmages that Waller put us through. Well, enough of that. No, I don't want to get into that now. Here we go.
It's another story.
Yes, now, Norm Parker, what a guy, but he'll live in infamy. He was a great Rotarian, a great businessman, and Molly and people would remember him. They were so kind. But what they'll never forget, he was in Rotary and he played the part, came out on the stage as the Whistler. And he had a hat that just came right here, so it looked like the hat was on the body, and he had these lips painted right here at the navel with lipstick, and then his little pants, and then he'd whistle and go, and his belly button would do the whistle. People would look at the audience and says, what am I seeing? But he was the original Whistler. Other
Mr. Show Business.
It was. Oh, your turn, Peter.
No. Well, there's
Tom Cole.
Tom Kogel. There was another community man of the first order. Tom did things for people. He developed some of the big developments in this town. You can't call Cody developments huge, but they were profoundly affecting, particularly after World War II, when veterans were coming back, and Tom was a part of those developments which were out there by the Mormon Church, the old circular drive out there, and he and his son Warren, they hired Bob Moore, who was a terrific basketball player and a classmate of Al's. If you ever go by the park that's called the Bob Moore Memorial Park, Bob was on the fire department like Warren was, like Al was, volunteer fire department in the town of Cody. But Bob died in the Cody Enterprise fire, and the memorial is to him. But the developments those guys made in this town and the community help that they gave, they were cheerleaders, particularly Warren, but Tom too, cheerleaders for this town, for this state, and for this community. Great guy.
And then he married one of the great teachers in Cody, Mildred McFarland, in later life, and she was probably one of the most popular of the teachers, and that was an interesting time for them both in their later years. Well, there you go.
Mildred McFarland taught typing in the high school, and she would try to recruit even boys. I was an easy recruit when I found out there were 7 girls in that class and no boys. I was the only guy. And who cared if you had calluses on those old hard finger taps on those old typewriters? But she was a sweet lady, wonderful lady.
He was a disciplinarian, I remember that.
Yes, she was.
Now there's Jim Patrick, and that was Lucille's, Nichols' husband, and that's Nick's dad. And he and Bill Barker, we were talking about the Directors Club. Barker and Patrick were the chefs. This was where the old white building, which was just recently torn down, where there was those 5 condos, that was the Directors Club for many years. And the chefs were Jim and Bill Barker. He died in a car crash coming back from Basin. But if there was two people who made the Directors Club what it was Bill Barker, whose wife was the wonderful Alta May Markham. Markham was part of Basin with a Markham Hotel. But anyway, there's the Directors Club. They were the glue and the grease, the two of them. I don't know if we had Barker before, I think was before.
I think you can tell by that picture, this guy was personality plus. He was such a pleasant, fun-loving guy, and it was tragic to see him go. Buck Julian, contractor.
Well, now there's Buck. He had killed every animal in America, I think, and South America too. He was a contractor, lived out there on the edge of the hill, and a very remarkable. And his wife Rosalie was a great part of the hospitals and the Red Cross and the women of the hospital. But he was just. He was always into things. He was a great friend of Lloyd Eaton, who was the one that was involved as the coach of the Black 14. And when the Black 14 ended and an apology was about 3 or 4 years ago, which was well received because he just said, well, it's another story. You don't want to get into it. It's about religion.
Moving along.
Oh, Joe.
Yes, now where were we? Yes.
There's a handsome guy, another partner with Gopp.
Oh, Joe
Joe
Fitzstevens.
Fitzstevens.
Boy, handsome guy. Big old Irishman. Strong, wonderful lawyer. Came into my office after a year of practicing. He said, "Have you learned anything yet?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, you got a case and you're going to learn something on this. It's called, I can't even what the issue was." And he said, I had never heard of that. He said, "Well, I'm going to use it on you. So why don't you just settle this case for about $5,000? I said, "Okay." I never heard of the concept my whole life. Anyway, he was tough, but I can remember he'd have a cigarette in his hand there, and he'd come up. I was sitting at a bar party or something. I had my hand behind my back, and he slipped his hand into mine. He said, "You're doing okay, kid." I never forgot that. And he was strong, and he and the old man got the liquor license and opened the Burlington Inn. Now the Burlington Inn was a classic thing, and our mother helped design all that out there, and the pottery. Some of you have that in your home. I know they're the people with the pottery, and I know the people that own the ashtrays. The ashtrays were by Ed Grigware, this cowboy holding a cigarette with bow-legged. They stole all those the second night of the opening. The dishes disappeared, and then the bartender disappeared with the money. And Joe was left, and Pop were left with the liquor license. Pop said, "Well, it is helpful to, if you're buying a case of scotch, to have a liquor license." Then they both went broke and sold it. It was not a good thing.
Moving along.
Moving on. Mm-hmm.
George Brown.
You tell them about George there.
Well, just the hoodoo foreman for the ages, replaced by, it's an interesting story, replaced by J.D. Radakovich. Don't know whether he's in the audience, but there was, I think George told the story, or somebody did, that when they were hiring J.D., George himself said, "Well, he's too young for this job." And so one of the members of the board said, "I don't know whether you recall, George, he's the same age you were when we hired you."
Yeah, I think that was it. He said, "He's a great guy." I said, "Just worry about his age." So JD will be out there till he's 80, and then the Hunts will be living on forever, and they'll find another one, but nobody like JD and Elizabeth, or George and Donna.
George and Donna.
And he flew his plane a lot, but sometimes he would not do very well with it. He crashed it about 4 times, I think. But he walked away, and
Yeah,
then
walked away from another one.
you're pushing us on.
No, I want to just share a story. 2 weeks ago, I got a photograph in the email from J.D. Radakovich showing him on Carter Mountain last fall, where he landed up where the TV towers were. And I had told him when I had taken my dad up in a Super Cub, landed there, but I couldn't get the tail wheel down. And Dad had gotten out, photographed the towers, got back in the plane, and I didn't even have to add power. The wind picked us up and we peeled back to Cody. And JD remembered that from a trip we'd done a couple of years ago, so he sent me a photograph, a selfie with him in front of his airplane, sitting on the ground on top of Carter Mountain and Cody in the background. He has learned to fly and is following in the footsteps of George. He's got 500 or 600 hours, not quite safe yet, but I said, keep working at it. And I asked him, I says, do you have an instrument card? He says, well, I don't think I need one. I says, the instrument card I had when I was flying, I had a hole punched in it, and when I held it up to the sky and it was blue, I knew I could fly. And he kind of looked at me and he says, I just fly low and around the ranches. But anyway, he's doing a great job out there. Go ahead.
He called Mark, the grizzly bear guy. We all know Mark from around here, and he said, I've got some cow-eating thing out here, and bring a trap. So, and he was cursing, and as he said himself, I was swaggering around. He said, I don't think you trapped anything. Did you get anything? And if you know what you're looking for when you see a trapped grizzly, they sit in the back of the cage on their butt, and then they, like lightning, they head right for the wire and just slobber all over you. Anna's had that syndrome.
That's a personal
But then
experience for
George
Al.
says, where is that Cal Keaton son of a bitch? I don't even see him in there. And Mark said, well, he's there. And George says, get out of here. Don't tell anybody. God. Well, enough of that.
Jack
Yes.
Duggleby.
Yes, Jack Duggle. Yes, there it is, the old master
Airman.
pilot, Duggleby Drive. I believe that's your cell phone. Is that Time Magazine calling about your subscription?
Yes.
Your subscription is expired.
While he's taking care of that, Jack Duggleby was the chief pilot of Husky Oil for years. And I was headed back to the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia, and Glenn and Jack were going to New York. And they said to my dad, Jack, we'll take Bob back and drop him off in Quantico. Well, I got to sit with Glenn and visit, and I got to sit up front in the old B-25 and fly with Jack. And I was on top of the world. I was going into officers training, and we landed at Quantico. Jack knew the military well, and we landed on this military base, and everybody was out there wondering who the VIP was. And they opened the door, and down I went, and when I hit the deck, here was a Marine sergeant. He says, "You're mine." And everything went to hell for me from then on.
Now here's, wait, yeah.
Shall we go to the next one?
Yes, Mac,
There we go. Done.
does it remind you of this wonderful man?
I can hear the.
Duck Melson, he quacked, you know. He could do this duck stuff. And he was a member of my class, our class of 49, there's only about 6 of us left. Lee Ballinger, Don Kurtz, Harold Lee, well enough of that, and Jerry Lanchberry.
Jerry Lanchberry.
And so, anyway, Duck, he worked all the time when we were in high school. He was out at the Husky station rest of us were out to football practice and all that. Had this great grin. Anyway, he started the Kenmar Flowers, and then they'd had that subdivision out there with those beautiful houses near the park. But his best one was he was a big buddy named Chuck Badavinas. He was the sign guy. And they had borrowed some money from a guy, and the guy was kind of little nervous about that. And so Kenny and Chuck, who had been on about a three or four dayer, would always nicely done. They were functioning. And this guy didn't hear very well, and he hummed a lot. And so Chuck and Duck went out and said, you know, that money we owe you, yeah, oh, you're a great pair, I love you. And said, I just want to tell you, and we left you a CD, remember that? Yeah, we do. Well, I tell you, we want to take, and we want to get that back because and he looked and he said, what is it? I didn't hear that. They said, it was the best gag of all, except for that guy. He said, you dirty. Oh, those were the good times.
All right, let's go on here.
Well, also in the good old days, I'm not sure where we can talk about the Grizz title, but Doc Howe was the dentist, the local dentist here. And there were not many dentists. I think it was just Doc, Raymond Howe. And this was in the day before Novocaine. And how many are pre-Novocaine babies? Probably a lot of us. Anyhow, he had a chair with sort of marble arms on it, which you could squeeze that marble into mush because of that glacially slow drill that he had, which he used on you with no Novocaine. And I'll tell you, so Al and I are up helping Dad clean his office. Doc Howe was at the end of the hall. Dad was at the south end. So if you remember those old sort of serrated glass windows where they calligraphed in black ink the name of the office. And Doc Howe, Raymond Howe, dentist, ODD, and it was on that glass door. But if you had something like a small pocket knife, you could actually scratch some of that off. So Al and I, while we're cleaning, both of us having suffered pre-Novocaine torture with this guy, we went over to the office door and we scraped the H and the E off of his name, which left Dr. Al.
That was a very clever thing. But his assistant was Juanita Jensen, who was a member of our class too. And Juanita married Hill, and she was our treasurer. But Juanita worked for Doc Howe, and he became the mayor of Cody too. He was a great guy, but that was unfortunate.
Moving right along here.
Who the hell?
Oh my God.
Oh God, there he is.
Anybody of the family here?
There's some Mannings in the room.
Yes, I saw him come in.
I did. That's Jack. I think it's in wintertime too. A little snow back there, but Jack, he was a big time oil business. When you say, "What are you in?" I'm on the oil business, and he was a driller and a owner and a leaseholder, and married Pat Griever.
Pat Griever.
Of Paul Griever fame.
Who had a full-page picture of herself in Life magazine. She was such a beautiful gal, and she sort of represented a Cody spirit. And I have no idea what the subject of that was, but a full page.
Sadie Hawkins Day.
Was it Sadie Hawkins Day? Wait a minute.
Thank you.
My wife, Lynn, outran the football boys on Sadie Hawkins Day.
I think we better move on.
Well, anyway, he and Dad loved his children, and Dad would come. Dad had been attacked by a dog at the Presidio when he was in the First World War, and he hated dogs, and they hated him. And he said, "I think they can smell you." So he carried a stick with a piece of lead in it, with a, Manning's dog and other dogs would run out, and Dak he gave no quarter. They just fell to no, they didn't go back. But anyway, Jack's dog, and that's enough of that. And the kid, there he is, Kid Nichols, legend, the wrestler. See that? And he wrestled because he drank great quantities of mineral oil during the day so that he would be slick when he was wrestling people. Now, how his bowels were responsible, I have no idea. No one ever asked about that. But you were going to talk about him or something.
There are great stories about him.
I think we better keep moving along.
You should read Lucille's book, The Candy Kid, which is a great biography.
How about when they go through the church with the offering plate? They don't see him
Just a
ever.
quick one before we move on. Yes, particularly at Christmas time, because that's the only time Kid came to church, Christmas and Easter. So Dad was the senior warden of the vestry in the Episcopal Church. They all belonged, and so Dad was walking down on this one occasion down the aisle to make collections, to pass the collection plate. And he got the Kid, and Kid put a $10 bill in there, and Dad stood there and shook the plate in front of him, and Kid reached in for another one and got it out. Dad shook the plate down, and the Kid afterwards said,
It was terrible.
"I'm never going to go to church again."
Till Easter. All right,
Except Easter.
all right, where the hell were we?
Dan Ballard.
Dan Ballard, the last guy to let you down. There he was. I thought you'd all heard that. Well, we don't call them undertakers. They're called flight attendants. No, he was a great guy. He was a great Rotarian and a wonderful city guy. He was active in the community in so many ways. What was it? He said, "Any of you had any problem with false teeth? I have a jar full back there."
Said a barrel full.
He said, and then he said, "Well," he said, "I saw you when you buried old so-and-so a few months ago. He never had a suit like that." And Dan said, "I just changed his head." No,
I think we better move on.
One of his customers said, "My God," he asked his friend if that corn on the cob hurt his teeth, and the guy said, "They're not my teeth."
well, let's see. Bob Dosey, boy, he saved the Irma.
He sure did.
What a guy. Ruth's
Still alive.
she's still here. One wonderful gal. And the Irma was gonna go, and Dosey stepped in and he said, that's not gonna happen. You're not gonna tear that down like you did at the Cole Mansion. And so he stepped in. There's so many things that he did in this community. He owned the Half Moon
Yeah, sure.
out there where you could really get beer underage. It was a wonderful place. And then there was, what was it? Like something he was followed around and somebody followed him.
He fired a cook, and he told the story one time just to raise the hair on your head, because this cook was bitter, hostile, And Dosey is at Pahascatipi with his wife, and he came out of a little party there, and when he came out, there was a car with a flashing blue light on the top. And he said, "Pull over," said this guy in the car. And he said, "State trooper." And Dosey shouted at him, said, "There's no such thing as a state trooper in Wyoming. What do you want?" And this guy said, "Get out of the car," and he could see him brandishing a weapon. And Bob took off, went down the North Fork like a bat out of hell, got to where the Half Moon turnoff is, which is a very sharp turn if you go in there, even to get beer underage. You can make the turn if you're 18. But so he made a quick turn. The guy went by him, and he got to his place, the Half Moon, dialed up the equivalent of 911, called the sheriff's office. And the sheriff's office came out and chased this guy. And I think some of you might remember this chase went all the way back up to Hayden Meadows in the park. And they had dogs, and they traced footprints to the edge of Yellowstone River, couldn't find anything on the other side. And the legend or the story is these two roughnecks must have gone over the falls on Yellowstone. But Bob Dosey's story was just, you could catch your attention with that one.
Now, what?
Hank Cole.
Hank Cole, well, we know what a great person he was, and everything in this community, whatever you thought of it. He was a county commissioner. He saved the airport, Yellowstone. There were times when they would ask for a guarantee for air service, and there were about 10 of us on that board, the Yellowstone board, and I don't even know Ann knew. We all pledged $5,000 to save the flights, and they never called it. Thank heaven. But that was what he did. He was totally unselfish. He was a wizard of the education laws of the state of Wyoming, and they will miss him. They miss him. I'm not talking about the legislature, but this community will miss him. And the airport will be called the Hank Cole Memorial Airport. But we all know who he was. He was a dear. Now,
This guy worked with our son when he was in the state government, and this guy was the head of the Transportation and Tourist Committee, and that was terrific asset for that.
did you want to tell about phonograph one more time?
Yeah, one more, next.
Too good about it.
Oh,
Phonograph Jones, this legendary.
Oh, we didn't
guy.
get him.
Well, wait, here are you going to tell who that is? There's Paul.
We've got photographs here, just a few at the end. We got Henry Coe, the lady, Irene Walker, I don't know her, and Paul Stock on a goose hunting trip. And this was hanging on the wall at the Directors Club. Let's keep moving, we're about to run out of time. Here's a group of poker players at the club, and at the top is George Bratton. And next to him, Bill Durham, Max Wild, Nick, and there's several others there, but, yep, and anyway, let's go to the next one. We're gonna run over just a little bit. Here's Paul Stock and Dr. Dakin at the museum. And Paul Stock, you can talk more about him than I and Dakin, but these are just some photographs I took at the Directors Club. Next. All right, here's the original green front that was started in 1900. And not only was it the green front, but it was George Beck's office. And so that worked out very well. Let's go to the next picture. This was the next place it moved to, and we all know where that was. And the green front met on the right side down at the end where the rodeo office is today.
And this was our grandfather's law office with Donnelly right there on the Walls building. This is where the jewelry this is Sean's jeweler store right there.
And the Western Union. went into
Western
that
Union, that's right.
Office right there.
Next. This is the next place that the Green Front moved to. And their office was down on the right side of the building, and they had a separate door that went into the Green Front. Let's go to the next one.
Yes, there it goes.
Yep.
There's the Green Front with Governor Beck at the front door of his office, and the tables were back behind his office. And that was behind the old Shoshone Bank, and the Eagles Club is there now. Okay, next. Here they were moving that building, and at that time it was, I think, a radiator shop. Okay, next. This is Governor Beck playing cards at the Green Front, and we found this and slipped it in there. He loved to play cards. Next. This is the last place the Green Front was, on Alger, right next to Taggart Construction, and the Elks Club is to the left. Next. This again is where they are today, and we should have 2 more pictures or 3. There is the current chairman, Howard and Greg Penley, who's vice chairman, and look at that hammer. There it is, and it has Kid Nichols' name on it when he was president. I photographed that the other day at their meeting. But all these memories keep coming back, and the Directors Club has had such an influence, and always will have, because it's a great group of men. And you've just gotten a taste of it today. Next. That's it. The McCracken Research Library sponsored this. And thank you all. I'm sorry we ran over time. If you want to ask these young men a question or two, would love to have it, but we've run out of time. Thank you.
Any questions for Bob, Al, and Pete?
I just want to thank Eric, I want to thank Bob for doing this, and I want to
Mac.
quickly mention, and Mac, God bless you. I want to quickly mention, I couldn't go by Phonograph Jones without telling you, when they asked him one time, were you alive during Prohibition? And he said, yes, I was. I said, what did you think of Prohibition? And he said, well, it was better than no whiskey at all.
That's true.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? I can tell you really would like to have these guys keep talking, but thank you for being with us, and we'll see you in 2 months.
Bob, we'll see everybody upstairs to get a signed book outside the bookstore.
Okay, I'll go up there. We're done. Thank you. Thank you.